Well, I think first and foremost, it was great to get back on the field with the guys. I think there was good intent coming out to work. Clearly, we had a little bit of rustiness, having the time off. But it was good to have, remotely close to our full allotment of players, which is key. This time of year, we're really trying to teach schemes on offense, defense, and special teams. We got to make sure we've got as close to a full allotment of players as we can. So that was the decision to kind of push back here for, kind of a little bit of the delay. But all in all, I thought the intent was good. The competitiveness was good. We're continuing to learn how to practice. We're starting to get a little bit of an idea about players, but clearly we haven't put the pads on yet, so it's tough to tell. I think as we move into tomorrow, we'll get shoulder pads on. We'll start to get a little bit of a better idea, but all in all, for practice 2, from an installation standpoint and from an intent standpoint, from a player's perspective, I thought it was a good day.
Great. Thanks, Coach. Dennis, go ahead. You start us off.
Coach, can you share anything? Did you have any conversations with Juwan Mitchell, and what's your level of concern at that position with him in the portal?
Well, I mean, he's in the portal. I think that for us, we coach the guys we have, and we've got some good young players at that position. Again, new scheme, so we're still working our way through a little bit of the growing pains of things being new. But we have some young, talented players. We got a couple more guys coming in. So all in all, you coach what you have, you focus on what you have, not necessarily what you don't have. I don't really have concern for the position right now. But again, that's a position you find out more about when you get pads on. For the first 2 days now, we've just been in helmets, so we'll find out more as we move forward.
Danny Davis, go ahead.
Steve, of the guys that are still on your roster who opted out last year, Daniel, Dejan, are they back with the team? And if they are, what has been your impression of them after taking a year off with these few practices and meetings and stuff like that?
Well, they're back. I think again, a lot of guys when they opt out, they come back in there. It takes a little bit, from a conditioning standpoint, but that's what the off season was for. Clearly, they've been in the same meetings everybody else has been in. So you just start to get an idea about just kind of the football awareness piece. When you don't play football for a year, when you're not around it for a year, sometimes that's the part that is the slowest to catch back up. But again, we're 2 days in, so it's hard to tell exactly, where people are at. But it's good to have them back. It's good to have as many guys as we can out on the field working, trying to get better.
Chris Tavares, go ahead.
Steve, how much did this COVID pause affect you guys? What were you able to do during it? And it sounded like you chose to return to practice a little later than you could have, just to make sure you had more guys available. Is that right? Yeah,
that was really my decision. With COVID, anytime, a couple people get COVID, it's more about contact tracing. So I wanted to make sure that the guys that were under contact tracing, once they cleared that their protocol there, that we could get them back in the field. What we were able to do in the meantime was continue to do our walkthroughs without a ball, so that we can continue to teach, as well as condition our guys, as well as lift the guys. So I think that helped in the delay, us getting back on the field today, of really knowing what to do, and doing a better job of understanding what we're trying to get accomplished in all 3 phases of the game.
Bob Ballou, go ahead.
Steve, how long do you think it takes you to really know who a guy is and what he can provide for you offensively, defensively, wherever it is? I mean, will you have to go all the way through spring and let these guys play it all the way out, or do you get a feeling pretty early?
Well, I think everybody varies really, Bob. When you think about it, some guys you can really start to tell natural instincts, understanding big picture, not just a specific play, but big picture, what we're trying to accomplish. And then, I think you got to get them into some scrimmage formats, to make sure from a physicality standpoint, they're okay. Other guys, you may not know, they might not be great practice players. And then they start to show up in a scrimmage, it's like, whoa, all right. So I think there's 2 sides to it. And then there's some guys that are really good practice players, and then you get into that scrimmage and or game format and you can't find them. So I think there's varying stages for every player. We try not to jump. We try not to jump to too quick of conclusions on anybody, but rather allow it time for it to kind of evolve.
Anwar, go ahead.
All right. Hey, Coach, I'm just kind of curious from a philosophy standpoint, which positions do you rotate the most, through seasons, throughout games, and then which ones do you not rotate as much?
I think I'll probably go with the latter first. I think that we probably rotate the offensive line the least and the quarterback the least, right? Naturally, those are the guys that generally stay on the field pretty consistently. I think you have a little bit of rotation at times on the offensive line. Then the rotation kicks into what does your position group look like? So you may rotate linebackers, you may rotate DBs, you may rotate the D line based on depth or based on need to rotate. Sometimes the receiver position is one, that you feel like is a natural rotated position. But if there's such a discrepancy between maybe your frontline starters and the next group, you try not to rotate those guys as much. And so I think part of it is, who are you as a team, but also what does the position group look like, and then what it looks like moving forward. So, that's a philosophical approach. Naturally, the more players we have that can play a high level of football, we want to give them opportunities to play. But also, you earn your playing time, and you earn your playing time through your practice habits, through your understanding of knowing what to do, and then ultimately doing your job and making your plays when they're available to you. And that's going to take a little bit of time to figure that out.
Joe Cook, you're up.
Steve, I was wondering how what the center position is asked to do in your offense, and who are some of the guys who are competing for that spot, whether it be Jake or any other number of guys.
Yeah, I mean, the center position is a relatively integral part. Clearly, he makes a lot of our calls at the line of scrimmage and needs to do it in a timely fashion. He's somewhat of the quarterback of the offensive line. I think Jake Majors is off to a pretty good start. I think Graffiti's off to a pretty good start at the center spot. Both competitive, both high football IQ guys who are athletic. Nothing is really set in stone on the offensive line. Coach Flood is really rotating those guys quite a bit right now, even a couple of guys at different positions, to just kind of see how they gel together, see if a guy may be a little bit of a better player at guard as opposed to center, or tackle as opposed to guard, or right tackle as opposed to left tackle. So again, it's early on. We don't have pads on, which playing the offensive line without pads is a little bit more difficult. So I think those things are going to start to show themselves a little bit more here over the next couple of days, and then even into next week.
Terry Middleton, go ahead.
Coach, good morning. A couple days ago, you commented on Twitter on a story about having breakfast with Pete Carroll and Bill Walsh, and you asked about what Bill Walsh looks for in a quarterback. And so that was a fantastic story. So what does Coach Sarkisian look for in a quarterback, and has anybody stepped up and met your criteria?
Well, I think two things. First of all, I think especially when you're recruiting a quarterback, I think the first one is he really truly an innate competitor? I think playing that position, there has to be a true sense of competitiveness and drive inside of them, no matter what they're doing. It could be playing horse, it could be playing ping pong, it could be getting ready for a science test, it could be playing football, whatever that is. They need to have a real sense of competitiveness. And two, I think there needs to be a real sense of leadership from them. That's natural leadership. I'm not saying everybody leads the same way, but they can't be afraid to get in the front, right? They can't be afraid to be that guy. And I think we're fortunate. We have two guys that embody those two characteristics. The third one, and this is coming directly from Coach Walsh, is does he throw a catchable ball? I always remind people what's the goal when we call a pass play? To complete it. Well, do you throw a ball that allows it to get completed? And then you get into all the other variables: arm strength, height, weight, speed, understanding of the offense. But those are kind of the prerequisites for the position for us that now we can build on moving forward.
Colt.
Hey, Coach. During your time at Alabama, you had a chance to work with 4 receivers who potentially will all go in the first round. Just in a little bit of film and also on practice, have you noticed anyone really sticking out in their connection with either Casey or Hudson?
I wouldn't say anyone's really sticking out. I think you get a sense of the guys that have maybe played a little bit more football, right? Clearly Josh Moore's played more football. Jay Witt's played more football, and their just level of comfort being on the field. But whether Calvante or Marcus Washington, these guys, Jaden Alexis. I mean, a lot of guys now are starting to get a little bit more comfortable through 2 practices, but we've got a long way to go. They're learning a new scheme. Now we're back into football mode. There's a little bit of anxiousness going on, and we'll get those guys a little bit more calmed down and getting comfortable doing what they do, which is getting open and catching the ball.
Good time for a couple final questions. Cedric, go ahead.
Hey, Steve. I know your zeal to find out who's a good game player and a good practice player. You have to walk that fine line of physicality. What's your philosophy on hitting? How much do you hit in the spring, and how do you walk that fine line between finding out and avoiding injuries?
Well, I think we can't be scared to get hurt. I think that's one of the misnomers of football, right? You can't be scared to get hurt. The moment you try not to get injured, you get injured. I always feel like that. I think if we're going to have a contact practice, we're going to put full pads on and be in contact, we got to prepare for contact. This is a physical sport, right? It's a contact sport. It is what it is. In spring practice, I've never really been one to condone back-to-back days of hitting, back-to-back days of full padded practices. So we'll always try to alternate those days of when we really go full pads and get after it. A lot of the times you'll see us throughout this spring, we may have a padded practice or a shells practice on a Thursday. On Friday, we'll go to helmets, and then we'll come back and go pads again on Saturday. So, that's kind of been a little bit of the philosophy. Again, I don't view just wearing shoulder pads and helmets as full contact. We're not really going to the ground, but when we put full pads on, and we're really having live practices, I generally don't do those back-to-back days. So I do try to protect the players that way. Because I don't want them to try to protect themselves necessarily in the practice. If we're going to go, we need to go. We can't try not to get hurt, because I think that's when essentially you do get hurt.
Time for 2 last ones. Chip, go ahead.
Sark, as far as your athleticism on the defensive line from film you've watched and what you've seen so far, how would you describe the athleticism on the defensive line?
I think the athleticism is good.
Kirk Bowles, go ahead.
Yeah, Steve, I'm curious what you did during the pause, how you passed the time, and how worried are you can't get to the finish line this spring, and a lot of the spring work could be compromised if not shortened.
I'm like I said earlier, we were able to continue to do walkthroughs, which were important. We were continue to condition the players, continue to lift, which actually I thought was good for us. I'm not as concerned. We've got a pretty good allotment of players right now. You naturally in spring practice, you're going to have a couple of guys coming off of injury, a couple of guys getting bumps and bruises along the way. So I'm not really as concerned, especially knowing spring practice doesn't butt up to spring recruiting right now. Technically, we don't have to finish spring practice at the spring game. So if we have to take a bit of another pause, we can still have a spring game and we can still practice after. We get 15 practices and we'll make sure we take advantage of all of them.
Got one last one. Carter, go ahead.
Hey, Coach, you were talking about receivers earlier. I wanted to ask about Troy O'Meary. He missed all of last season with an ACL tear. How has he come back physically, and how is he adapting to the full practice schedule and the offense?
Well, I think Troy's come a long way. When I got in here, he was probably about 4 months removed from surgery. Now we've added about another 2.5 months. He is, he is running. He's going through individual. He's doing some limited teamwork, not extensive. He looks good. I think he's just getting more and more comfortable with like, okay, I'm getting back to normal. I am getting, I am healthy. And, again, anytime you have major surgery, like a knee surgery, it's as much mental as it is physical. And so we're working on the mental psyche side of it with Troy, of letting him understand that his body's good as much as it is physical, that we monitor the knee, checking the swelling, things of that nature, any of the stiffness there. But from an understanding of the offense, I think he's right on pace with everybody else.